Okay, I'm just going to give everybody a few seconds to join before we get started. We have a quick town hall today, so just give everyone a couple minutes before we get started. All right, so let's just get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this town hall, our 40th town hall. I'm your host, Rajani, so let's get started. Up first, we have a quick announcement from People Ops. We have a new core contributor, Andre, joining as a NIM developer. So make sure you reach out and say hello. Speaking of hiring, we are looking for referrals or suggestions of anyone you know for an engineering lead. And a small update for the offsite, please remember to get your flight books as soon as possible so prices aren't higher later. And don't forget to please add agenda topics to the discuss post. And then Carrie with a quick update.
Yep. So you might have read on Disqus that we're changing our password manager. So we've decided to get rid of LastPass. It wasn't a great user experience. And we've actually found an awesome open source equivalent, which is Bitwarden. A few of you recommended it and we checked it out and it looks really good. So I'll be reaching out to you in the next couple of days about migrating passwords. So have a think already. If there's stuff that you know you need migrated that maybe only you had access to, that would be great to have ready. And we've got a Disqus post going. And the question that we have right now is whether to go self-hosted or not. And if we do go that route, we'll need to do it sooner rather than later. So yeah, let us know what you think about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. All right, jumping next, we have an update from Rachel. Hey, Rachel.
Hey there. Yep. So Jenner's update for this week. This is a view. I'll start off with the V1 update. So project view of status V1 in Reich. We just updated this morning. We are apparently 84% of the way to our V1 code freeze scope completion. After talking with the guys this morning, it sounds like we had set ambitiously a target of mid-August to finalize all of the remaining work for this particular scope. And it looks like we're close, but we'll probably end up conservatively having V1 audit ready by end of August. And I'll go into a little bit more granular detail on the course slide later about what we're working on. A couple other Janner updates that I want to share. There are a few Disqus posts that are important if you'd like to weigh in on. One is called What's Next for Status, and that was just requesting feedback on the vision that Jared shared in Town Hall 2 weeks ago. And there's been some really good discussion within that post about hiring a tech lead. So thanks very much to everyone who participated in that. And if you have any further thoughts around that, please weigh in. I've also recently created a post about the remaining V1 scope that we cut. Just making sure that we prioritize everything appropriately for the release cut itself. So there's a bunch of items in there that came out of our scope cutting call from 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I want to make sure that anything that needs to be included in the release is flagged. So have a look at that as well. And lastly, I have been going around and talking to all of the core contributors on the client team recently, just to kind of check in with people, see how you're doing, get your thoughts one-to-one on the tech lead issue. So there are probably a couple people that I still haven't had conversations with. And if you're one of them, I'll set something up with you this week. And then once I'm finished with that, I will share out like a little bit of a report on an anonymized report on what I've heard from people. So that's it for janitors.
Great, thanks so much, Rachel. All right, now we're gonna jump over to token economics with Corey. Hey, Corey.
Hello, hello. You can go to the next slide. So last week, or maybe actually about 11 days ago, we had a hurdle funding article created from Barry on Eth Research that got some interest over there. Go to the link there to go read. Good article on evaluating whether or not it's useful to recycle fees. Most of the time when people take fees in crypto systems, they burn them, which means they send them to an address where they can't be recovered, which then supposedly raises the value of all the remaining tokens that are currently available. Barry did an analysis to see whether or not it would be better to recycle those fees into other projects, and then how to evaluate when it's better to burn or to send it to a different project. So it's an interesting article on that. We're currently working on a Tether Network article to transition from the previous utility token economics articles. So after the Discover one, we're going to move to Tether Network, which gives us kind of transition just nicely into some of the new strategy of opening up and focusing more on the status network and what that has to offer. And then after that, we're also in discussions with Forbes to create a series on adopting traditional finance models for cryptocurrencies. So what that means is how do we take some of the financial modeling tools that people use for traditional assets and adapt them so they fit nicely within cryptocurrencies, or more useful, and some like coming up with some of the variables used there. And so that'll be like a multi-series, I guess a multi-blog series for Forbes. And that's all we have.
Cool, nice update. All right, we only have a few Swarm updates today. I think a few people are out, so we'll jump right in. First up, we have Core, and back to you, Rachel.
Yeah, so I've merged Core and Core UI into one side now, since we're working together as one team. So we've got kind of two parallel paths. We had been working on putting out another beta release, version 0.14, the highlights of which are meant to be pushing stickers on mainnet, some bug fixes, and then just some general preparation for V1, including a notification to all of our users of the changes that are coming ahead so that they can prepare themselves adequately. However, we discovered a blocker 2 weeks ago that still is not resolved. So for Android, for the Play Store, we now need to put out a bit64 version of our app. And there is a bug in this version that Pedro is currently working to troubleshoot. We won't be able to make another Android release until that is fixed. We might end up as a contingency making a re-release of version 0.13 for iOS, just because we have until sometime later in August, the end of the month, to maintain our iOS distribution list. So if we don't fix this bit64 issue in time to cut the full release, then we're going to go with plan B, which is just re-release on iOS to maintain our distribution. As for V1, the team is making really good progress on each of the big scopes of work. So the Realm database removal accounts are nearly finished there. Dimitri and Eric have been tag teaming that. I believe multi-account account generation itself is now complete, and Andre has moved on to the options for adding more accounts, one via the bit54 path, which would be just to create a new account so that you can have multiple, and then also the option to create a watch-only account. And then we have Andrea and Adam, who are working on the 4 remaining open issues under protocol separation, which are critical to the V1 scope on the status go side. And I believe all of those issues are currently work in progress. So, yep, I've included links to the relevant project boards on GitHub if people would like more detail. And that's our update.
Great update. Thanks, Rachel. Next, we have just Core. Sorry. What?
I think the slide was still skipped.
Oh no. Okay. Bear with me.
I can just talk. There's no need, I guess, for a slide.
Go for it.
Yeah. So we basically, we're in this phase that we're writing very more detailed documentation and spec about the whole Tether network, as well as doing an internal audit, as well as some formal testing. So we had sort of like a code freeze. Meanwhile, we reopened that code freeze because Simon, which is a designer, joined the team, and he did a lot of changes that look really worthwhile. So we implemented and are still implementing some of those changes to the UX, namely. And that's it for now.
Okay, sorry everybody that the slide didn't come through. Just a quick note, we will share the slides at the end of the town hall so you can see what you're talking about with the relative links also shared. So now we jump into Q&A and we have just one question that was submitted. And I believe Johnny will take this one, and it is to please explain our V1 marketing strategy.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Cool. So the details are being finalized now. So there's, still some things to sort out, but basically we're taking the launch of V1 as an opportunity to tell us essentially 3 stories. Obviously launching the product, which I'll go into detail on. Using that as a time to really start communicating, not the shift, but the idea that we're building communication protocols, and that extends into messaging. We can use it as a time to amplify Nimbus, and then potentially some other stuff around storage as well. And then the other story we'll tell is really, I guess, elevating the status network, and I guess trying to distinguish status, the core application, and status, the network. I think there's just a bit more work to do around that so people can actually distinguish between the two and understand the two, and we don't pigeonhole ourselves into just becoming a mobile application. And then if focusing on V1, we're going to break it down into potentially 4 categories, which is brand. You typically need brand comms to make sure we're continuing to tell the story of our principles and why we're building this, and that's just lightweight content, community activations, things like that, really to drive the emotional connection to the product. Second is the product itself, right? So we need a lot of explainer content and explainer material at a high level, which is Messenger, browser, wallet. And then if you think of it in terms of like a funnel content marketing plan, middle of funnel then is breaking down those features a bit further to the benefit of them from a privacy and security standpoint. And then if you go further down the funnel, it's kind of like the technical details around them. So that is not only really, really driving the point home, but then also encouraging developers to get involved and like our core community to really get involved as well. So that's brand, that's product, activating the community. Oh, sorry, rewinding a bit. On product, we're going to be, you can break that down into message, browse, and wallets. And each one of those have their own stories, but from a browser perspective, we'll be leaning into dApps quite a bit. So obviously Andy's done a lot of this really interesting work with discovery, and we're building out what's called the dApp integration center right now. And there's an entire inbound and outbound campaign strategy to activate dApp partners around the time of our launch as well. And then there's community activations. So really, really tapping into our ambassador group. We're trying to build out the ambassador program further right now ahead of the launch. We're trying to build out local communities. So for example, we've got meetups in Istanbul before our offsite, trying to like build these local communities all over the world: Istanbul, Seoul, Japan, Latin America, you name it, just tapping into the ambassadors and incentivizing them to build their local communities as well. And then the final kind of pillar is PR. We're going to lean pretty heavily into PR because that amplifies the message at a rate that our channels just simply can't. So investing pretty heavily in that, our launch partners, just to try and drive as much possible awareness around the launch. I think it's a really important time for the application. It's a really good time to like use that to then amplify these stories around it. So like I was saying before, communication protocols, and then also the status network. So that's at a high level. There's also some obviously very tactical things we're working on around, like safe ad networks, which we're exploring, like CodeFund, things like Brave Browser, all these ways just to like get the word out there, but also staying true to our principles. So that's a very tricky thing that we're trying to work around right now. We don't want to just tap into like standard ad networks and quote unquote growth hacking methods, because a lot of those just go in direct opposition to our principles around data privacy and data usage. So stay tuned on that. I'm planning to present all of this in a much more detailed plan, probably in the next town hall. So hopefully a lot of questions get answered then.
Cool. Thanks so much, Johnny.
Mhm.
Does anybody else have any additional questions for today's town hall? All right. So thanks, everyone. This was a quick town hall today, and we will see you next week. In 2 weeks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thanks, Rajani. Bye.